All right, good evening and welcome to the February 7th meeting of the Sunbury Services Committee. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Capel?
Here.
Mayor St. John?
Here.
Mrs. Dreyer?
Here.
Mr. Grumney?
Here.
4 present.
We have minutes to approve from the January 3rd meeting, and hopefully the mayor will join me on this because nobody else can. So I'd like to make a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll second.
Second by Mayor St. John. Roll call.
Mr. Capel?
Yes.
Mayor St. John?
Yes.
Ms. Dreyer?
Yes.
Could abstain.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Grumney?
Abstain.
2 yeas, 2 abstentions, and it's passing.
And on the topic of that, welcome to the Services Committee to Ms. Dreyer.
Thank you.
I like to call it the best committee. So you're learning a lot about streets and sewers.
All
So
right.
it's exciting stuff. And
It
welcome back to
sounds
Mr. Grumney too. So it's a brave new year. Seeing absolutely nobody in the audience, I'm going to assume we have no visitors for this evening. So we need to get on with new and unfinished business, which starts apparently with the selection of the committee chair. How does that need to be done? I don't even remember.
I'd like to nominate Damon Capel.
I'll second that.
Well, thank you. Okay, roll call.
Well, are there any other nominations?
Are there any other nominations?
No, sir.
Here.
Not from here.
All right then, roll call, please.
Mayor St. John?
Yes.
Mr. Grumney?
Yes.
Ms. Dreyer?
Yes.
Mr. Capel?
Yes.
4.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes, I appreciate it. This has been a committee that I have enjoyed serving on greatly. And I appreciate the opportunity to continue to lead the committee. So thank you. We are moving on then to fiber briefing and preliminary installation guidelines.
All right, so I'll help to get us started, but Dan's going to help walk you through the document that we've got in the packet, which begins on packet page 4. So for the 2 new committee members, although John, you probably remember this, but for you, Molly, this is going to be relatively new. Last year, we did conduct a fiber feasibility study, high-level study about how to ensure that every address in the city of Sunbury, whether it's a business or a home, had access to fiber. And what should the city's role be in terms of kind of helping to facilitate that? So there's a study that's been completed. I can share the results of that study with you. But again, it's high level, strategic in nature. It's not the detail of what a fiber network might look like in the city. But since that time, we have had interest from 3 different fiber providers about providing fiber services in the city. And although 2 of them are somewhat quiet at the moment, we do know that, well, actually 1 of them somewhat quiet. We know 2 of them are working on developing some engineering plans that may result in them moving forward with the fiber installation in the city. So with that, one of the things that we had talked about is, okay, well, do we have any guidelines that would kind of govern, the management of that whole process? So with Dan's help, put together some preliminary guidelines that are still in draft form, but wanted to talk through these with the committee. So unless there are any questions on kind of that, I was going to turn it over to Dan. Okay, no, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Hennessy. I will go over, I'd have a little preview, I guess. First, I just wanted to say a few things first. As a former service director, I wanted to go, I guess, a few things of lessons learned that I've run across when I've done this sort of thing in the past with service staff. One is that underground installations of any utility tend to be pretty messy, and they are disruptive to the communities. Residents tend not to understand that the right of way is not their property, and rightly so. I mean, it is their backyard, and we all have ownership and feel ownership with that. And it tends to be, you're digging in their yards and putting manholes, handholds, whatever it is with that certain utility, and it creates a mess, and restoration is extremely important, as is trying to be reasonable with the construction as you're doing it with the activity. Just the way they act is, smoking cigarettes, throwing trash in their yards, as well as the excavation and throwing dirt around and not restoring the area. So that's something we need to be sensitive about and make sure that their people are doing a good job as far as being respectful and doing a good job. And if they do installation pole to pole, that also, it's not quite as disruptive, but it tends to be messy afterwards. I've had a lot of places, a lot of experiences with them they'll leave those spirals of cables hanging down, and they tend to hang down. Sometimes in the storm, they'll go crazy, and you have poor responses from the utility providers with taking care of those things. And just something we need to be cognizant of as we go through these things. Prefer the underground installation for the long term. For the short term, it's kind of nice to have them do the work above on the pole to pole. Just as a point, so you understand that there is both underground and pole to pole. You'll see both of that with any of these installers. Utility companies, for whatever reason, tend to feel entitled. The PUCO has kind of led them to feel that way, and some of the regulations historically have tended to have them feel that way. They tend to kind of push themselves onto the community, and we tend to have to push back. And to protect our residents, that's what we do, and I assure you we will do that. Some are better than others, and hopefully we'll run into ones that are good. Our records, most communities' records aren't always accurate. In today's environment, a lot of utilities underground are plastic. You have those plastic conduits that are running for gas, for electric conduits, for sanitary sewer, for storm sewer. A lot of these utilities are pushed underground with tunneling, with boring, and sometimes those will push right through the utilities. You have to have accurate records, or at least make sure they do their best, and we do our best to help them locate those utilities so they aren't pushing through those. And sometimes they will push through those. Often you'll know that when it happens. Sometimes you don't, and you'll have a utility. Obviously with gas, you find out pretty quickly. With water, you find out pretty quickly. Sometimes with sewer, you don't, and you'll have a leaking sewer for a period of time, which becomes a real problem. We have to be careful with that. I've run into some real nightmares with that. Which need to be, again, it's a matter of care. We need to plan ahead. That's what this document is for. I'll go over that. We'll get to that. It's the fact that our records aren't clear. They will ask us, when you do any project like this, as you know, you contact OOPS, and OOPS locates the utilities. Delco come out and locate the water lines. AEP will come out and locate their water lines, et cetera, et cetera. We'll need to locate our sanitary sewer and our storm sewer, and some of our records aren't historically accurate, so we need to be really careful about that. It'll cost us staff time to do that. We would want to make sure that they pay for that time, because it's going to be extensive as they're going through all these communities. So in some manner or another, we want to be able to be assured that those costs are covered. As they're doing the work, we're going to want to inspect it. We want to make sure those costs are covered. If they do break a line, we want to make sure those costs are covered. So we want to have some sort of surety in place as well. All things that we want to recognize, and they are hinted at in these guidelines. They're not fully covered. So that's something we need to fully digest and get more detail on as we go further on. We don't know what we don't know. As I do have some experience, I don't have enough to be fully vetted in this. I would like to contact some of our peers in other communities that have had specifically fiber optic go in, see what kind of guidelines and regulations they put in place, see what lessons learned they've had, see what fiber optic companies they've worked with, see what their experiences have been, just so that we don't see mistakes or successes they've had and learn from those so that we can know and learn from their lessons. So that said, I'll go through these regulations, which I have largely put together from some investigation and research. And it's just general engineering and construction guidelines for putting together a set of plans that are easy to read. And primarily for us, as we are trying to acknowledge what it is they want to do in our community, and as we go out and inspect what it is they're doing. And as their engineering group will put together the plans, but then they have another group go out and put them in the ground. You want to be able to clearly communicate what their intention is to put the fiber optics in the ground. So I've asked them to make sure that, well, backing up, some of these providers will do their plans in AutoCAD. Some of them will do in GIS. I think you've probably realized by now I'm an advocate for GIS. I'd like to be able to have all of our utilities put in GIS. They will design Altafiber is the one that seems to be really on top of things and be really aggressive right now. They tend to do an AutoCAD. I'm asking them to also provide us the information in GIS, so we'll have that. So that is a requirement of this as well. Communication with the residents. I think there's an obligation on our part, but also an obligation on their part to make sure they're communicating with the residents in a reasonable period of time, 72 hours in advance. We're going to be in your neighborhood. We're going to be doing this work. Here's the contact information. If you have any problems, please call us. If you search fiber optic problems in communities, you'll find, I think it was in Long Branch, Texas or something like that, that you even see news stories about, residents having concerns with fiber optic cable cutting our utilities. They cut our fiber or cut our cable, they cut our electric, those kind of things. It can be difficult. We want to avoid all those kind of things. And we want to make sure that they're not calling us necessarily. We want to know about it, but we're not going to be able to fix it. We want to make sure they know who to call to come out then and take care of it. In fact, they put fiber optic in my neighborhood, had an underground fence for my dog. They cut right through the underground fence. It took me a heck of a long time to convince them they cut my underground fence, and then they didn't know how to fix it. It was a nightmare. And it took them 3 days to even be convinced that they did it. They finally fixed it. But I learned from it. So anyway, so to have these engineering plans together, it's have 3 original copies. I like to have those on file. Really what we'll use are digital copies, and we'll have them in GIS. The plan should be in color. Certain things should be colored with consistency in different ways. I would want cross sections so we know where the utilities are, and so we know that they will go under those utilities or over those utilities so that they don't cut through them, as I described earlier. Any conflicts are avoided. Planning ahead, not planning in the field. Indicating vertical and horizontal conflicts. Some of the work in the vicinity of bridges or culverts is important because there's structural issues that could occur as well if they get in the way of footers or abutments at bridges. Those are obviously visible, but still they have to be very careful. Some of these companies, some of these providers use manholes and handholds. Handholds are the smaller ones that they use to do their connections in. So, and manholes are larger ones where they have major connections for like at intersections where they're going several areas. But we want to make sure that they're not putting those in the sidewalks or in areas that are inconvenient or safety hazards. So we want to make sure all these things that they say right here, located out of sidewalks, trails, shoulders, out of ditches, so they're not collecting water. Minimum and maximum sizes, minimum sizes, sorry. Make sure they're labeling everything, avoiding things in the right of way, staying out of the way of guardrails, etc. You can read these. There's nothing magical about them. One thing that that is a pet peeve of mine is these markers you see sitting above ground. They don't need to do that. They like to do that.
Gas lines.
Like with gas lines, you get those big, right? You get these big ugly bollards that are sitting up and they're in the community and you see them all over the place. They don't have to do that. They can use the flesh markers. They just can't drive by and see the flesh markers. They have to actually get out of the car and walk and see them. There's one at the, I think I have a picture one at the end.
Yeah.
I will require them to use those. Different providers, speaking of above ground features, different providers use cabinets differently. One of the providers we talked about said they'd use one cabinet and they'd put it out there by Kentner Parkway by the water tower, which is great. A different provider said they'd have like 6 of them and they would be located in certain areas in the neighborhood. The cabinet would be about the size of that podium. I know one of the city managers I worked with was insistent that they be painted a certain color, and I already talked to one of the providers and they were, they don't want to paint them. But I think we would want to talk about what they look like and where they're located and how they're screened and that kind of thing. Not necessarily in here, but we still have the opportunity to talk to them when they put that in here, that we say, do we want them black? Do we want them screened? Do we want them located a certain distance off of a intersection? Those sort of things will have to be discussed as well. I don't know that we can, if their operation requires them to have so many cabinets, I don't know that we can do anything about that, but we can certainly dictate how they operate, how they install them and where they put them. Yeah. And then trenchless excavation when they're doing that boring, it's definitely a science and an art. And we want to make sure that they have qualified individuals doing their excavation again, because we don't want them excavating through our utilities or anybody else's utilities. So there's some certain requirements here to make sure they do reasonable steps to do their entry and exit pits appropriately, and they're not being too obtrusive with them, and that they're marking them properly. There's a whole list of different things there. I won't bore you with the details on that. Sometimes they'll get, when they're crossing roads, they do cross through roads, they'll hit our traffic loops. Make sure that we monitor that as well and that they repair those. They'll be near our traffic cabinets, make sure they're staying away. There's a lot of wires and cables that go with those, make sure they're staying away from those as well. Here on here, we say they must be a minimum of 10 foot away from those loop detectors and at all intersections. And then, so I don't have page numbers on my sheet here, but here's where I have continuous surety. We do want to make sure that they have a surety bond in place. And we'll need to work with them and probably some of our other communities of similar size to see how they determine what those sureties are, assuming they use them to guarantee that we're holding ourselves in a good position so that we're not screwed, basically. That we have enough money in place that if there is a problem that we're covered, particularly if they, God forbid, skip town. So that amount, I mean, it wouldn't be the full cost of what I wouldn't say it'd be the full cost of what their total construction is, but it'd be some percentage of that. And we want to make sure that they keep full, accurate records of all of their permits and that they file those permits with us. When they're done, they acknowledge they're done and they give us, let us know when they're done so that we're keeping good track of those records, and we'll file that in the GIS with all the attributes that go along with it, where the line was, as-built information, if it varies from where they said they were constructing it, that we have that information that shows, if they went over instead of under a certain utility, we have that record for our information when we do other utilities in the future. We're not interfering with their utilities. And just like any other utility or construction that happens, our community will do construction inspection, we'll do a punch list, and I would prefer to do that punch list in sections back up to the front of that. I didn't really know how to take down the sections for, I put a certain distance. You'll do this block and that block. You won't do a 5,000 foot section at a time. You'll do certain sections. Their operations kind of require them to do a certain length. I'm flexible with that, but I don't want them to do just one long length at a time. I want them to be in a manageable section so that we can keep track of it, we can inspect it, and it's not a total mess in the entire community at one time. And then also we would inspect it in that manner as well. And we do a punch out on each one of those before they go on to the next section.
We can do it like for a neighborhood, the equivalent, like breaking it into phases, right?
Right.
You don't
Right.
accept phase one until it's inspected. I mean, they could maybe run in parallel with phase two, but no.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So we track it, do phase one. We would punch out phase one, or at least get through the inspection of phase one, acknowledge what needs to be left there. They could have their punch out crew do that while they're going on to the next, but not get way ahead of themselves so that we're not keeping up with what's back. And
Can we determine that based on either, I forget what they call the points that, what do they call it? Our residential.
Are they the POP, the point of presence or point of?
Yeah, I mean, that's one. And then there's another one where it's like the connection to the house, like, can we cap like the quantity of connections or linear foot or something?
I think it depends. I don't know enough about how they operate to do that, but yes, I'm sure there's some way in their operation that makes sense to how they do stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
And they've said some of that, and I don't remember it all, but I've had 2 meetings with Alta Fiber, and one was with their business folks, second was like 5 of their engineers that were blasting me with questions, and they want to have another one, and we'll start nailing this stuff down. But there are just a lot of details that we need to work out. And to me, some of the most important stuff is that we're covering ourselves with the costs that will be associated with all this utility identification. Because that, to me, that's the most important part, is what actually happens when the boots are on the ground, and what's happening in our neighborhoods, what our residents are seeing, what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And that it all starts with what's on the piece of paper or on the GIS, however you want to say it. And I think it's important to have the engineering drawings put together in AutoCAD and GIS, that we have the permit applications, we have the vicinity map that shows each section that they're doing broken out in phases, the whole project that they're doing. So we have a full view of their map taken down in phases for the whole project. We have it in GIS with the full coordination, erosion and sedimentation control, and maintenance of traffic as well, because as we all know, to get these guys out on the road and they're doing this work, they've got their trucks and they've got their guys and we need to make sure that they're having good maintenance of traffic. We also probably need to have some sort of idea of what are the consequences if they don't follow our regulations. Do we have a stop work order? You haven't followed our guidance up to this point. Now is the point where we stop. You go back and take care of this before we allow you to go on to the next section. So I'll stop there and see if you've got any questions. I'm sure you do.
I have a couple. I'm glad you touched on, like, I had written down penalty for non-compliance or what have you.
Right.
So this is, if I understand right, this is just a general kind of like an outline
It is.
of what we want. So
We had nothing in place
Right.
when we started this conversation, so I wanted to get something out to get started on.
Right, okay. And then is there, and this may be a dumb question, but is other communities our size that have put in fiber optic, and I know you said lessons learned, that sort of thing. Do they have a completed document that we could use as a template so we can make sure not to miss anything just by, assuming we're we're putting in there?
Our size is the question.
Yeah, yeah,
I've reached out, well, I'm on the board of directors for APWA. I want to reach out to Groveport, Grove City, Dublin, Upper Arlington. They're not our size, but
right.
Wellington, I think we'll have a hard time finding somebody our size.
But I'm sure there's similarities.
Right, but there's similarities. Like Worthington, for example, is not that big.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah,
a little bit different, but still, I think they're probably, but they haven't had, fiber optic hasn't gone to them, so.
right.
But there's other communities I think we can get some answers from, and they'd be happy to come and chat with us, I'm sure. And have some guidance that we could definitely, borrow from.
Sure, sure. I appreciate that. And the only other question I guess I had or comment, will there be something you think in the document that will specifically say like restoration of grounds to original form? So if you're in someone's backyard, it's got to look like it did before you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, yeah. There'll definitely have to be a restoration component to this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we probably need to move pretty quickly on this because it sounds like one of them is going to move pretty quickly. So we're kind of going on a parallel path with one of the providers, I believe. So. Right.
Has Dave had a chance to look at this? Dave?
No,
Sorry,
not-
Dave, okay.
No, we haven't. We wanted to share this, I think, with this group and
I'm on board with the concept, sorry. I think I-
No, you're fine. I just had a question about, with the GIS, is that pretty standard that it wouldn't be any hurdle for us to expect a provider to update GIS as well? Is it pretty standard for utilities companies to use?
It is. It wasn't with one of them, which surprised me, but it should not be a difficulty for them to convert their AutoCAD to GIS.
We're starting to request that. Like,
It makes sense, yeah. I just wondered if it would be a go, no-go situation for anybody.
Even our firm takes, when we get a subdivision, they do that in AutoCAD or in GIS, they do it in AutoCAD and we'll take it and convert it to GIS. If we can do it, they can certainly do it.
Okay.
What I'm not certain is what attributes we want to put on there. So that's one of the things I'd like to find for another community. What is important that we know about each one of these features that are in their fiber
strands,
optics.
diameter,
Right.
the pops or whatever the
Yeah,
points are.
right. Yeah, I don't know.
Dormant conduit versus has live conduit, something like that. It's good. It's been really good.
Yeah,
Really great work.
So, thank you for listening to what is relatively dry information, but having said that, and not the presenter, I didn't suggest the presenter was dry, I said the information was dry.
Engineer's exciting.
Yeah, I know. But I think as Dan was alluding to, I mean, the fact that it may be difficult to find another community of our size that's experiencing this kind of interest is probably just another reflection, though, of how much in the bullseye the city of Sunbury is to these types of providers out there who recognize that they want to be in this market for the long term and they want to get in first. Most of them are trying to get in first for sure. So another maybe key takeaway is that while this process can be a little bit painful, I mean, clearly there are big benefits for residents on the back end. So we need to be smart about and effective in the way that we manage the process once it kind of begins to unfold. And then, yes, there clearly are some other pieces that we definitely need to get in place. So this is the beginning of the conversation, not meant to be the end of it, but we do need to move relatively quickly. So the thought was just at least share with you like what's on our minds, what we think are some of the best practices that other communities are using. Get your sense that, okay, yeah, you understand, and we should continue to proceed. And I think that's what we're hearing. So,
Yeah, I love the foresight that's gone into this, so I'm interested to see how it lines up with, regardless of size, anybody else's plan that has had fiber installed, so.
and the other thing I think I was going to add is that I mean, we do have fiber in the city of Sunbury already. So it's not that this is the first time that anybody's ever tried to put fiber underground in the city or on our poles. But Yeah, and we've got internet service providers already. I mean, you guys probably have services. So so there's existing fiber in the community already. So this is not, it's not like the community hasn't been through this before, but the level of interest at this moment is particularly high. And yeah, we just want to be smart about it. So.
I just have two things really quickly. One, I don't think this is into this. We would incorporate this into this document, but just as a goal. Anytime one of these companies is coming through and putting in a certain amount of pipe, I think we need to be thinking about oversizing. Oversizing is not the scale of like sewer pipe oversizing. You're talking about going from a pipe like this to a pipe like this, or conduit, where we can potentially add our own public strands. I think that's very important. I don't think we include that in our policy for permitting and things like that, unless you think it's beneficial, and I'd like you to chew on that. The other one, I'm a little confused where the manholes and handholds are gonna go. If they're not in the right of way, are they going on private property? Is that the
They can be in the right of way. They just can't, does it say out in the right of way? They can,
outside of the sidewalk? So I started thinking like, okay, where is this gonna go?
yeah, they, in the tree lawn, or you just don't want them in the sidewalks or trails where they can be a tripping hazard or a problem where they start cracking. And most of them, I don't believe, actually use manholes. They're mainly those small plastic boxes. Right, right.
Okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
Got one thing. You had mentioned multiple cabinets or one. If the multiple cabinets were placed around the city, would that section, if you had a problem with the fiber going out, would that one section leading to that one cabinet just be out versus one cabinet for everything? And if the fiber had a problem or an issue, would everything go out with one cabinet?
I presume there's one central cabinet and then network cabinets off of it, but I don't know that for certain. The way I understood it is yes, it would be, there'd be one main one and then they're like nodes off of it. So if it's one of the nodes, that area would be out, or if it was a central one, then they'd be all out. So it depends on which one, but generally speaking, if one of the nodes is out, that area that's connected to that node would be out. So they're two separate types of systems. The one was providing a system that was off of one central node and it just served the whole area. The other is off of a central network that had nodes branching out from it, and each one of those nodes served a separate area.
Okay.
Yeah, but one thing we ought to explore a little bit more with them is, I mean, part of the design, I think, of these fiber networks is that, again, they're done in a ring so that if there is a break, it turns and goes in the other direction so that it doesn't affect everybody on the loop. But again, that's worth us digging a little deeper to make sure we understand how each one would operate.
Right.
Yep.
It's probably worth telling them that this is new to us and that we may be, they may give us a submittal and it's going to take us, there may be some things in our guidelines that are not set in stone, that we may have additional requirements beyond what's in our guidelines. Because they like to say, well, it didn't say that in your guidelines, you know.
Got it. Yes.
So is there any ask for tonight or for the near future? You said we might need to move fast, so define moving fast.
Well, I think, I mean, what we probably need to do is need to think about what the fee structure might look like. And we might need to get that into another ordinance where we've got a fee structure built out. So that's what I meant by we've got to operate move pretty quickly on that front.
Okay.
So that wouldn't be in this type of document. That might be in a different document, but, as Dan alluded to, the one that seems to be moving pretty quickly, they are working closely with the city of Dublin. They're trying to leverage what they're doing in Dublin, bring it across the county through Delaware over to Sunbury. So, I mean, they're not going to be here tomorrow, but they are very aggressively engineering. And that's,
Yes.
yeah, that's why Dan's been in contact with them. So, yeah, that's what I meant by we need to move pretty quickly. But once it's submitted, I mean, there's a permit and review process that we get to go through. So, we can control on some level the pace.
Right.
at which that
Right.
occurs.
Any other questions? Are we on then to other updates? Municipal
We are.
building renovations?
We are. So just wanted to give this group, again, we've got two new members on the committee from when we last talked about this. But we do try to provide a regular update to the services committee regarding where we are with the building renovation. So we're updating renovating the existing municipal building and the police department building. So what begins on packet page 10 is the field observation report. This comes, as you can see, from DLZ. So DLZ, we have hired to be the city's owner's representative. They have a, what am I trying to say, a certified or a licensed architect? Is it a licensed architect? I don't know if I'm using the right term. He's an architect. Basically, they have an architect, we have an architect working for us who's basically, visiting the site, ensuring that the construction is being built in a manner that's consistent with what the city is paying for. It's important to note he's not the inspector. The county does the inspection work, but what the owner's rep will do is bring comments to us that from the cities will raise issues that the city needs to be addressing with either the contractor or the architect of record. So that's what that progress report is. And at this stage, most of what's happening in both buildings is the framing is up. The rough ends for the electrical are in place and the IT connections. You can see that the plumbing work that would have been, or that is in the floor, has been installed. And they're going through the inspections of that process now, the framing process. And they do anticipate that they'll be doing drywall here, if not later this week, hopefully next week. So the buildings will start to take even greater form at that point. We have had one challenge that we've talked about a couple of times with this group. The mechanicals are a challenge. And they were when we were going through the design process as well. I mean, in fact, just backing up to say, when we engaged MS consultants to help us with the design of the buildings, everybody that came in from the staff came in and talked about how the heating and ventilation systems don't work in that building. And then down in the police department, even though we didn't necessarily live in that space for any period of time, we were creating a whole bunch of new spaces over there. So it was going to alter the mechanicals. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. That's probably the one thing that's slowed us down the most at this point. I did get an updated schedule from the contractor. Originally, the plan was to be done with both buildings by the end of May. The new schedule shows that happening in the middle of June. So we're about 2 weeks behind schedule based on where we are today. And again, a lot of that, I think, has been because the mechanicals didn't get installed at the outset like was originally anticipated. But they're moving forward on that. And as I included in the administrator's report, they're going to be working on the mechanicals in the municipal building next week. And so we'll be out of that building working from home next week to kind of help expedite the schedule a little bit. But what I did for this group, maybe draw your attention to the last couple of pages in the document. So beginning on packet page 15, if you haven't seen it, I know these aren't that easy to read, but this begins to show you the uses and the spaces, how the building will lay out. So the page that you're looking at here, packet page 15, this is the municipal building. As in both buildings, the police and the municipal building, we're creating a much more secure entry and a way to limit the public's access throughout the building with the door system and a locking system to do that. So that's a key improvement. If you remember the municipal building, we basically had one conference space. We used the mayor's office for that. Here, we're going to create a large conference space that's mostly where the old mayor's office was, but we'll have a second smaller conference space as well for smaller meetings. That will be a nice, functional
Is that in the
addition.
upper left-hand corner, Daryl?
So yeah, if you put it on its side, yep, and with the 15 up in the upper left-hand corner, yeah, the left up, the left corner there is the large conference room. And the one immediately to its right there in the back is the small conference space. At the front of the building, then we'll have a open workspace kind of concept happening. And then offices to the western side of the building. That's consistent with what we had in the past. We are adding one additional office space where the old restrooms were and reconfiguring that a little bit. One other big addition or improvement here is we will have the copier space, and all of that will be in its own separate room. And that's a kind of a noisy operation. So that'll be a nice addition for staff. We do have we do have a break room that's kind of to the back of the building as well there. And again, so I know we've talked about offering up to any council member a chance to walk through the space. Reach out to me. I know John has, and we'll get you scheduled. I'll get you scheduled to walk you through the space. But if
I was gonna say, Daryl, if it's easier for you, because I don't think, Damon, you've been through it yet.
I haven't, no.
Yeah, so to make it easier on you, maybe we could coordinate a time the three of us could
Yeah,
go to save you
that'd
doing
be
3
great.
different trips.
It looks big.
Yeah.
It does.
well, it's the same space, but yeah, it'll be used in a much more efficient way. So, yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, and I can get you again, both the municipal building and down with the police department to look at that.
great.
So packet page 16 then shows you maybe begin to kind of visualize what these spaces might look like. I mean, this is not, the final set of finishes, but, kind of shows you a conference room with a much higher ceiling. We're exposing the windows and the light that comes from the upper level windows over at the municipal building. So that's been a big improvement. Yeah, so, you can look at that if you'd like, but like I said, it's kind of meant to give you just a rough sense of what it might look like. And then the police department building, a little harder to see because there's a lot more going on in the police department. But it's packet page 17 and just a few key highlights here. Again, this building will be much more secure. Obviously, it's the police department, much more secure than the municipal building, but it also begins with a very secure entryway for people to conduct business. You'll enter off of North Columbus Street there. We'll have probation, we'll have municipal court at the front of the building. That's a lot of the public interaction is happening in those two particular departments. If you're in to pay a citation or something, that's kind of where you would do that type of stuff. Anything that happens outside of that immediate vestibule, again, it's a secure entry and you have to be let in to the space. One thing that we've approved in the budget is another sergeant for the police department. So we've tried to create a larger space for where the sergeant's office will be there on the left-hand side. There'll be 3 of them sharing that space, but none of them, I mean, they should be not in the building at exactly the same time, although there will be a little bit of overlap. There's a conference room for them to be working on kind of the center right side. It's between what the police and the deputy chief's office there, the police chief and the deputy chief's office there. Is kind of continuing back through that main corridor there, men's and women's restrooms. Right now, we have just a single set of restrooms for our police officers, and we have both men and women. So we'll now have men's and women's restrooms and locker space in the rear of that. To the upper right-hand side, that's the squad room. Everyone, well, I don't know if everyone, but we will have individual workstations there so that officers, as they come in to file reports and do whatever they need to do, they'll be able to have their own separate workspace to be able to do that kind of stuff. We do have, and then kind of working our way to the left side, that open space there is a training facility. The police department has not had that in the past, so that would be nice. I think they do envision, that it could be more than just training for them. It might be other types of training uses that the PD might have, but principally it will be a law enforcement related training location. We do have a wellness room as well in that near the training space. Officers oftentimes after their shift ends, they may be waiting to go to the mayor's court, or they may have to go show up, for some other purpose. And so there may be a waiting period. So this would be a space where they could go and kind of get away, decompress a little bit. Or if they're, back from an incident, it also could be a place where they could decompress a little bit. Some restrooms there. And then those two spaces to the far left-hand side, which would be the north side actually of the building. So one is a sally port. Basically, that's a place where if they're bringing in, a suspect, they can drive the vehicle in there, close the doors safely, remove the person from the vehicle, and then process them out there rather than in some open space. And the other space next to that, then to the far left, is storage at the moment, also be a property room. So there's a lot more spaces in here than what the police department has ever had, and I know they're very excited about what they're seeing. So just a couple of other concluding points is that the rear of the space, so what's between the building here and the round top, which is where the police department is temporarily located, that will be behind a fence, so that'll be secure. That's where the vehicles will be parked, and also have a secure access. So again, if anybody brings in, or any law enforcement agency brings somebody in through the sally port, they're going through that secure fence area in the back. And then we are adding a carport to the northern end of the parking lot so that they can park the vehicles under some kind of secure shelter, just so that they can warm up the vehicle, because there will be electric out there just to keep it warmed up, I guess, before the shift begins, or between if they come into the building to process paperwork, what have you, but also to keep the weather off of the vehicles as well. So if they need to leave quickly, they're not out there scraping windows off of a police vehicle. They're able to respond immediately to whatever the law enforcement need might be. So anyway, we will pave that space in the back as well. Right now it's gravel. So
I just want to say,
Yep.
first of all, thank you for the presentation, the breakdown of this. I look forward to a tour, but this is just, this is night and day compared to what they have. And of course, with the admin, the building too, but I mean, for the police, and it's just got to bring a sense and level of professionalism for them to really feel like a police officer in a police department and not in a basement of some old building the work the city's done, and of course, on the administrative side, it's just fantastic. And I think all the residents will benefit from this. And I think it brings a sense of, pride to the city, I think, to know that our police force is being taken care of because they take care of us. And I think this is long overdue. And I think it's great for them. It's great for the city. So,
thank you.
yeah.
Other thoughts, comments, questions?
I'd like to see the kids go through it as a tour, really. The students at the schools.
Yeah, maybe after the construction.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably want to do some kind of a ribbon cutting. We may want to have an open house for the public, before too much is happening in that space. I mean, remember, it is an active police department, so you want to be careful about that. But, but maybe once it first opens, that would be a great opportunity for us to get the public to be able to see what they've put some money into, the kids.
Was there a thought to put a holding cell? Because I know the current basement or the current building had a cell in it, but I know we transformed to Delaware now. Was there any thought of adding that, or would just continue with the process of going to Delaware?
Yeah.
Too much liability probably to have us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a
sense.
lot of that, exactly.
Yeah.
So now
Laws change.
yes.
On.
How
I mean,
Yeah.
we can get into some of that, but I mean,
No need. Yeah, that I understand. So, yeah, very good. This is exciting.
I should have added, actually, we will have interior space for Ace, the police canine. So that, when he's at the building, he's got his own separate space. But we're also gonna add a kennel to the exterior as well. So if a stray dog is found, I mean, a lot of times it ties up our police officers, trying to deal with that. This would allow them to kind of place it in a contained area secure area until somebody can come in. Yeah, I mean, so it's big things and little things, that are going to make this just a great space.
That's awesome. It's
There
really
must
great.
be space over there for it.
I'm very excited for you guys to see
Yeah.
it. Councilman Neff and Councilwoman Cooper had a chance to join me and Daryl for a tour last Friday, I believe. And no, Monday, excuse me. Yeah, well, it seems longer ago. But it's amazing. The ceilings in the municipal building, that's 18, 20 feet high. You'll see the paint lines of the old 8-foot ceilings. It's
Dramatic.
dramatically different.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we could coordinate that tour, I think that'd be a fantastic
Mm-hmm.
idea. The three of us out there. I've been meaning to ask about it for a while and just never had the time. Is there anything else that you wanted to review tonight, Daryl, or?
Nope, I think we want to transition for the council meeting, so give us a few minutes to do that.
All right, then I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Mayor St. John. Roll call.
Mr. Capel?
Yes.
Mayor St. John?
Yes.
Mr. Ayer?
Yes.
Mr. Grumney?
Yes.
4 yeas, we are adjourned.